Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Athey and I'm back with Jessica Burbank to bring you your Friday news. Good morning, Jessica.
We're excited for another Friday. It's Jess and Amber back at it again.
So what's up first for us today?
Well, Amber, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has been cleared by the Capitol attending physician after he abruptly froze mid-speech for a second time in as many as 2 months. In case you missed it, here's that tense moment.
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's right.
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator Benny.
Okay.
After examining the 81-year-old senator yesterday, the Capitol's doctor gave him the green light to return to work, writing, quote, "Occasional lightheadedness is not uncommon in concussion recovery and can also be expected as a result of dehydration." President Biden was asked again about the incident at the White House yesterday. Let's watch.
I spoke to Mitch. He's a friend, and I spoke to him today, and he was his old self on the telephone, and having a little understanding of dealing with neurosurgeons and people, and one of the leading women in my staff, her husband's a neurosurgeon as well. It's not at all unusual to have the response that sometimes happens to Mitch when you've had a severe concussion. It's part of the recovery. And so I'm confident he's going to be back to his old self.
McConnell, however, found less sympathy from 2024 hopeful Nikki Haley, who said this on the matter.
What I will say is right now the Senate is the most privileged nursing home in the country. I mean, Mitch McConnell has done some great things and he deserves credit, but you have to know when to leave. That is why I'm strongly in support of term limits in this country. I think that we do need mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75. I wouldn't care if they did them over the age of 50. But these are people making decisions on our national security. They're making decisions on our economy, on the border. We need to know they're at the top of their game. You can't say that right now looking at Congress.
I just have the question of, if this was the resident physician at some kind of warehouse or facility where McConnell was responsible for operating a forklift, would he be medically cleared to go back to work? He probably wouldn't. You can't freeze up like that when you're on a forklift. Maybe we should have just as high standards for members who serve in the U.S. Senate. I think Nikki Haley makes some good points there. You have to make very important decisions, and there might not be immediate and physical ramifications as if he were a regular blue-collar worker. There are still very big implications of the minority leader freezing up every now and again at work. I think maybe our standards should be just as high for members of Congress.
Exactly. This moment, I don't buy that this is just the result of the post-concussive syndrome that they're talking about here. His fall was all the way back in April, and if it is the case that his concussion was that severe, then there needs to be an explanation for that as well, because the severity of this fall was really kind of brushed off by Mitch McConnell's team back when it happened. It was at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in D.C. during a fundraising dinner, and because it was a private event, I think people maybe didn't realize how bad it was. But if he's still having these side effects, then clearly this was more intense, more severe than we were initially told. And Republicans have to have consistent standards across the board. I mean, we've been criticizing Dianne Feinstein. We've been criticizing Joe Biden for showing their own cognitive deficiencies. If Mitch McConnell is going to stand up in 2 separate press conferences and have these moments where he's completely frozen, in one, his staff actually has to take him away from the microphone, then that's equally as much of a problem as it is on the Democratic side.
We shouldn't have to have their staff or handlers shepherding them like sheep when they get on the mic and they freeze up during a press conference. It's such a ridiculous sight. You could tell the panic in his aide's eyes. She had no idea what to do in that moment. She was like looking around for help. I don't think that's a normal consequence of a concussion. I've been concussed before. I was a college athlete. I've been around people who have been concussed. Very different reality, maybe because we were not 81 years old. We were in our early 20s. But I think that speaks to what Nikki Haley was speaking to, which is not only term limits, but some kind of cognitive test is a policy she's supported for quite some time. It's not just a part of her presidential policy platform. And I think it's necessary. If you wouldn't want the president of the United States or your member of Congress to run a hospital you would receive care in because they're old enough that you don't trust them to make decisions or you don't believe they would make the right decisions. That should be a good mental game you play when you decide whether or not this person should be in public office. Do you trust them to do the requirements of the job on a day-to-day basis? And I think many people would look at McConnell, they would look at Joe Biden, and they would look at Dianne Feinstein, and they would say, absolutely not. I would not want to be driving in the lane next to them on the highway. And so I think Nikki Haley is really onto something with this. And I would like to see more folks that are currently serving in political positions in the United States and elected political positions saying that they support term limits and they support cognitive tests or some kind of age limit that can be adjusted according to how much we're able to increase the expected lifespan in the United States and the working years in the United States with medical advancements. I think that's a fair policy to pass.
I hear what you're saying on this concussion point, too. I've never heard of this specific type of response being the result of a concussion. That statement mentions lightheadedness is common, but that's not what we're seeing here. I mean, it's true that lightheadedness is associated with concussions, but I'm not sure how that's relevant to what we saw from Mitch McConnell. And back when he had that fall in April, The Spectator reported that some of his colleagues, such as John Thune and Barrasso, were actually having lunch meetings with fellow senators trying to shore up support for what they believed was going to be a pending leadership battle. So they clearly knew that something was up all the way back in April. But it was after that report that Mitch McConnell quickly returned to the Senate and sent the message that he wasn't going anywhere. Well, now we're at the point where Kentucky is in the middle of this governor race between Daniel Cameron and the incumbent Andy Beshear. And the way that Kentucky chooses replacement senators in the case of a resignation or some other vacancy is a little bit different than most states. The governor doesn't just get to pick. However, what happens is the senator who's leaving party gets to offer 3 potential replacements, and the governor picks one of those. However, Kentucky Democrats have basically stated that they want Andy Beshear to challenge the law and to appoint his own replacement that's not from the Republican Party and dare the Republicans to sue. So it's possible that Mitch McConnell is trying to wait out this election in the hopes that Daniel Cameron, the Republican, takes the seat and then they don't have to worry about any of that. But that's just another example of how so many of these older politicians try to hang on to power for as long as they possibly can. In this case of Mitch McConnell, also with Dianne Feinstein, the Democrats trying to get a temporary replacement for her on the Judiciary Committee, the Democrats not wanting Kamala Harris to take over for Joe Biden. And then in the case of John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, where they didn't have him drop out of the race for a potentially more or less establishment candidate after he had that stroke and was in recovery.
I'm glad we're getting into a little bit of the local Kentucky politics because Mitch McConnell is kind of entrenched in them. When I think about how Joe Biden is defending Mitch McConnell's current cognitive state, his health, it's like you guys sound like you're on the same team. And what team is that? Is it just the establishment in general? Is it old white guys trying to stay in office for as long as possible despite their obvious cognitive decline? And I think it's really establishment, same team kind of politics, because I think about the outrage just a year ago when the abortion issue was at the forefront of everyone's minds, especially in the Democratic Party. And Joe Biden decided, okay, I'm going to nominate Chad Meredith, an anti-abortion lawyer, to a judge position to become a federal judge in Kentucky. A lot of folks speculated, was there some kind of trade with Mitch McConnell as to whether or not Republicans would block appointed positions when Joe Biden would potentially have to appoint Supreme Court judge, that there was some kind of trade happening between the two. After there was a lot of outrage, he deserted those plans, but it seems pretty obvious that if no one was paying attention, it would have been Chad Meredith who was appointed, which I think just speaks to the establishment handpicking who they want in these judge positions. It speaks to how much the establishment works together. To see Joe Biden defend Mitch McConnell, I don't think we would see Donald Trump defend the minority leader if they were a Democrat in some way. I really just don't see it. It really, I think, speaks to how much the establishment works together and expects that from one another.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you know what? I think Trump probably wouldn't even defend McConnell in this position. I mean, I guess it depends on the circumstance. He definitely was a big fan of McConnell getting the judges through. But on a lot of other issues, those two are not the best of friends. But I agree. That statement from Joe Biden kind of said it all. We'll be back with more Rising after this.